Hi everyone, we're back for another Godly Play lesson, and today we have Renzi and Liv with us.
Hello.
The peace of the Lord be with you and also with you. So we're going to continue on today with our Faces of Easter, and we're going to just recap our first and second Faces of Easter that we did last time. And then we'll learn about the several more of them. Yes, friends?
So last time, didn't we learn about Jesus' birth and how he ran away to God's home?
Yeah, how about I hold up the lesson, the last two lessons, one at a time. I'll say the title, and maybe you could tell us what that lesson was about. Okay? Our first Faces of Easter is called Jesus' Birth and Growth.
It is when he was born and he saw the crosses on Mary and Joseph's face, and then he grew up to be a boy, Jesus.
Yep. Well, he was just a little baby, and Mary and Joseph's job was to keep the baby warm, feed the baby, take care of the baby, so the baby could grow. And the baby grew. And that's the first Faces of Easter. And when you talk, Renzi, try to speak up a little, just because sometimes our voices aren't heard that well unless we are really speaking louder.
Yes. Sounds very nice.
Okay. Our second Faces of Easter is called Jesus is Lost and Found.
This Face of Easter is where Jesus Joseph and Mary can't find Jesus, and they look everywhere, and when they finally find Jesus, he is in the temple, and he states that he is in his father's house. And Mary and Joseph, like any other parent, are confused and ask, why did he run away? And Jesus replies with, didn't you know I was in my father's house? But they thought he was referring to Joseph, but then they realized he was referring to God.
Later they understood, but then they didn't. And this was when Jesus was about 12 years old. Yes, and so they had traveled with the people from their village into the city of Jerusalem for one of the high holy days. And when they were on their travels back to Nazareth, that's when Mary and Joseph noticed that Jesus wasn't with them and with the group. And of course they got scared. They went back into the city and they looked every place that they had been. They looked in the dark and narrow streets. They looked in the marketplace. They looked where they had stayed that night, and they couldn't find him anywhere. And then finally they went to the temple, and it was their last hope. And there he was, and he was talking to the rabbis, the priests. And what were the priests doing?
They were listening to Jesus, and they were talking to him as well.
Yeah, they were like really interested in what he was saying, because Jesus knew so much.
And they were both learning from each other.
Yeah.
And he was 12, and weren't they? They were probably like adults.
Oh yeah, yep. And then when they asked, why did you leave? Jesus' reply was, didn't you know I would be in my Father's house? That makes sense to us when we hear that, right? Now that we know, but back then, they were confused. They didn't understand that, but then they grew to learn. And that was the second Faces of Easter. Now our third Faces of Easter is called Jesus' Baptism and Blessing by God.
And this is where he goes to his cousin. I believe his cousin?
Yeah, what's his cousin's name?
Roderick.
No.
His hair looks like Roderick.
Blank the Baptist.
Blank?
What?
Blank the Baptist?
His name and then the Baptist.
Oh, Jeremiah.
John the Baptist.
John the Baptist.
Okay.
This is where Jesus arrives at John the Baptist's blessings.
Well, John the Baptist was baptizing people.
Yes, and that's when Jesus went, and he asked for John the Baptist to baptize him.
Baptize him. Right. Do you know where this was? The river
The river of Oakland.
Jordan. The river Jordan.
Well, and then John was like, John said, he said, must you baptize me? Because he thought that Jesus was so powerful and almighty, and and honorable. And that is very, very true. That is extremely true. And he was wishing for Jesus to baptize him, but little did he know Jesus' wish for it. Well, he did know that Jesus' wish was for him to be baptized by John.
Right, because it was written that John would come before Jesus and make the way. And at this time, Jesus was he was a man, and he was about 30 years old. And he went to the River Jordan, where his cousin John was baptizing people. John is this one here with the crazy hair.
That's why I said Roderick, because Roderick has crazy hair.
He was a wild man with crazy hair.
Like Roderick.
So Jesus waited. He waited and walked into the river until he was face to face with John. And he said to John, "Baptize me." And John looked at Jesus as if for the first time. Now he saw who Jesus really was. "How can I baptize you?" he said. "You're the Messiah, the one we have been waiting for. You must baptize me." "No," Jesus said, "it is written that you will come before me and prepare the way."
That is very important to be written, like your future been written. And Jesus, that just shows that Jesus is persuasive and will do what is written for him to do.
It was prophesied, right?
And he will not give up.
So Jesus said, "Baptize me." So John put Jesus down into the water, into the darkness and the chaos of the water. And when John lifted him back up into the light, there were people there that day who said they saw a dove come down from heaven and come close to Jesus. There were also people there that day who heard a voice. The voice said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." And after Jesus was baptized, he went out across the River Jordan and into the desert. And he stayed there for 40 days and 40 nights to learn more about who he was and what his job was going to be.
Yes.
And that is the third phases of Easter.
I believe that, for him, was very clever. Because he was going to find out who he wanted to be and what his job wanted to be, And that is something that's very crucial to your life. And yet
he knew he had a job.
Yes.
And he had to go and he had to stay in the desert for a while to figure out what it was.
He was becoming one with nature.
Oh, he was becoming one with God. Our fourth phases of Easter is Jesus' desert and discovery experience. So Jesus went into the desert to discover more about who he was and what his work was going to be. He was there for 40 days and 40 nights. There was little to eat or to drink. One day he heard a voice. It said, "Why don't you turn one of those stones over there into bread and have something to eat?" Jesus said, "No. To be a real human being, we need more than just bread to eat." Suddenly, it was as if Jesus were on top of the great temple in Jerusalem. The voice came back. "If you are really the Son of God, why don't you jump and see if God sends the angels to catch you before you hit the stones below?" Jesus said, "No, we do not need to test God." Then It was as if Jesus could see all the kingdoms of the world. The voice came back again. If you will follow me, I will make you king over all of these kingdoms. Jesus said, no, I am to be a king, but not that kind of king. Then the voice went away. Jesus went back across the Jordan River and began to do his work. But what was his work? And that is the fourth basis of Easter.
May I please make a prediction on Jesus' work?
Yes.
I predict Jesus' work is to find those in need of help and show them the right path that will lead them to God. And I also believe that his work, I believe that his work will definitely be something to do by helping those that are in need. And, yeah.
All right, well, let's see.
Oh,
Let's see what our next phases of Easter is.
we might also go to the dinner. Yes, I got it. You love this part.
This is our fifth basis of Easter, and this is called Jesus as healer and parable maker. Yes.
So can I explain it?
Sure.
So this is when he finds a blind man, and the blind man asks to be able to see again, and no one really believes that Jesus could do it. And then Jesus goes and he gets dirt, and then he gets water, and he rubs it against the man's eyes, and when the man opens his eyes, he can see. And that is the definition, and that represents a miracle that God has blessed a man with.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very, very beautiful and touching. Very beautiful and touching.
So Jesus came back across the Jordan River and began to do his work. But what was his work? His work was to come close to people, especially the people that no one else wanted to come close to. See? He has come close to this blind man. He's so close that he has touched the blind man's eyes. And when Jesus came close to people, they changed. They could see things they could never see before. They could do things they could never do before. They became well. Jesus also told parables. Finally, he knew that he had to become a parable. So he turned toward Jerusalem for the last time. And that is the fifth basis of Easter.
Wow. The fact that he did that to people that no one else wanted to talk to is
Yeah.
very, very good.
Our sixth basis of Easter is Jesus offers the bread and wine.
The sixth face of Easter, where Jesus offers the bread and wine, is where. So if you go to church, then you would know communion, and that is when you are given the bread and the wine. The bread is represent Jesus' body, and the wine is to represent his blood, and that shows that those two items represent his sacrificial actions, and that is where he is giving to those who need. And I believe this is where he is spreading the bread and the wine with everyone at the table, at the holy table, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well let's see what happens. So Jesus offers the bread and the wine. Jesus went to Jerusalem for the last time. It was the time of the Passover, and the city was full of people from many different lands. They thought Jesus was coming to be king, but they weren't paying attention. He wasn't riding on a great white horse when he came into the city. He wasn't being carried by soldiers. He was riding on a donkey, and it wasn't even his. He had borrowed it. Still, that Sunday, when Jesus came into Jerusalem, people waved palm branches, which were a sign of kings. On Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Jesus went into the temple to teach. Every night he went back to the Mount of Olives with the 12. The people watched him and whispered that the Mount of Olives was where angels were supposed to come down to make an army to drive away the Roman soldiers. One day when Jesus was teaching in the temple, he said, "Do you see that old woman over there? She's going to put something in the money box. Listen, did you hear anything?" "No, because she put the smallest coin there is in the box. That was all the money she had." Now here comes a rich man. He has so much money to put into the money box that he had to have help carrying his bag. His money makes a huge clanging and ringing as the coins pour into the box. Now I wonder which one really gave the most, the old woman or the rich man? What do you think, Renzi?
I, myself, even if I didn't know this, I would honestly believe that the rich man gave more because he had given more money. But now, as I take a step further and realize the old lady had given all she had, and the rich man still had more to spare. So the old lady, therefore, had given more because she had given all she had. And the rich man hadn't given most likely anywhere near all he had.
Yeah. Well, some said at that time that the rich man gave the most, and some said the old woman. The temple guard said, "On Thursday we will take him." But on Thursday they could not find him. That evening, Jesus and the 12 hurried through the dark streets to a house. They climbed up the stairs to an upper room and shared their last supper together. After they had everything they wanted to eat, Jesus took some bread and gave thanks to God for it. Then he broke it and said something like, "Whenever you break the bread like this and share it, I will be there." He also took a cup of wine, gave thanks to God for it, and said, "Whenever you share a cup of wine like this, I will be there." What was he talking about? He was always saying things like that. How could they know? Still, they did not forget, and later they would understand. Suddenly, Judas got up and left. The rest sang a hymn and then went to the Garden of Gethsemane on the Mount of Olives. Jesus wanted to pray. When he was finished, he joined the 12, but Judas came out of the dark and greeted him. This was a signal for the temple guards to take him. They too came out of the shadows and took Jesus away with them into the night. The 12 disappeared into the darkness as well. And that is our 6 faces of Easter. So the 7th faces of Easter, the one who was Easter and still is. The night was a confusing one. The next day, Jesus was taken outside the walls of the city and was crucified. That afternoon, Jesus died. The sky grew dark Jesus was taken down from the cross and buried in a cave. A great stone was rolled into the opening of the cave to close it like a door. Saturday was so quiet you could almost hear the earth breathing. On Sunday, it was the women who had the courage to go to the tomb just to be close to Jesus. They wanted to remember, even if it was sad. And when they came to the tomb, they found that the stone had been rolled back and that the tomb was empty. Jesus had died on the cross, but somehow he was still with them as he is with us, especially in the bread and the wine. Look at this. I can't pull them apart.
It's because they're one. They're one with each other.
When you look at this side, the crucifixion, you know that the other side is there. Easter. And when you look at this side, Easter, you know that this side, the crucifixion, is there. And you can't pull them apart.
Because
This is the mystery of Easter. And that makes all the difference. And so, the colors change from purple to white.
and purple.
From this crucifixion to this Easter.
And purple plus white is a soft color, just like Jesus' heart.
Yeah.
Willing to have a spot for anyone.
So we had our first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh phases of Easter, where we learned about Jesus from birth all the way up to his crucifixion. And then we saw that the other side of the plaque was Jesus with the bread and wine, but different than this sixth phase of Easter, where Jesus was with the bread and wine with the disciples. This is different. And it's the other side of Jesus' crucifixion. It is Easter. It is life. But wait a minute, when we look at this, it looks like it ends here. And it can't end. We know it doesn't end.
Like Jesus'
So,
love.
let's see what we can do here so that we can show there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, but it doesn't just end there. So if we have this side, our story just ends. It just ends with Jesus' death. But we know there's another side, and you can't take these apart, but there's another side where it doesn't end with death. So let's see how we can arrange these. Renzi, you might want to stay there while I arrange them so that Liv doesn't get excited and fly around. But let's see if we can arrange these. Because we can't just leave the story in a line.
May I please help you a little bit?
Sure, yeah, you can help as we just move them around. So let's see. Let's pull this up a little bit. Actually, we'll start up here. We'll go like this. This is the beginning. Where would this one go, Renz? We don't want a line. What do we want to make?
I see you there. We want to make a cross.
beginning and the end. We want it to flow because it doesn't end, right? It keeps going and keeps going. So our second one will go here.
Yeah, like a cross, almost making a cross shape.
Let's see.
We could make the infinity symbol.
I think actually our birth will go here.
Yes, that makes very much sense.
And then Jesus as a boy will go there.
Yeah, because like right there, if you turn that the last one over, like that one, it shows the death, but then it shows the birth.
Yeah, there's the death. So then our next one can go here. Our next one can go up here. And then here, here. And then, does that look right?
Yes. Yeah, it actually does. I know. Okay, so it's Jesus' birth. Jesus goes. Jesus is a boy. Jesus is baptized. Jesus goes off to do his work. Jesus does his work with the man. Jesus is with the dinner thing. And then Jesus is crucified. And then it starts again.
But how does it start again? Because this just stops here with Jesus being crucified.
No, turn that over, please. May you please turn that over? No, it doesn't end.
Now it keeps going on, doesn't it?
Yes.
Now it can go on forever and ever. And the story has no end. Because there is no end. Death did not conquer Christ. Christ conquered death. And Jesus taught us in the bread and the wine that when we share this bread and wine and give thanks to God for it and do it in Jesus' name, He will be there with us. He will always be there with us. And this is the faces of Easter. Do you have any questions, Renz?
No, I don't. Does Liv?
Liv, do you have any questions? You were a good student, Liv.
Thank you for
Stay
the
there.
Thank you for the company.
Well, happy Palm Sunday. And we have Holy Week coming up this next week. So remember the faces of Easter. Remember what Jesus went through for us. And remember what is on the other side. This is what Jesus went through for us. But remember, you can't have this side without this side. And this is Easter. Pure joy after such a sad, sorrowful time. And this is what Jesus gave us. Be thankful and know that Jesus is life. Easter is new life. Jesus showed us that we will conquer death.
And this happens in spring when it blossoms, like you said, because He blossoms our hearts and makes us so happy.
Yeah. So bye everyone, and we'll see you
Bye.
soon next week. God bless.
Bye.